Welcome to NTD Good Morning.
Here are today's top stories. House lawmakers are back in D.C. after 2 months. They're expected to vote to reopen the government. Now this discussion is pivoting more to health care as Obamacare tax credits are set to expire in January.
Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy warns of a travel breakdown if the government shutdown continues any further, with airlines possibly grounding all flights this weekend.
The Supreme Court allows the Trump administration to extend its pause on funding SNAP for another day. It comes as Congress moves closer to ending the government shutdown.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio meets with G7 leaders up in Canada as trade tensions, defense spending, and the war in Ukraine dominate the agenda.
The first big chill of the season. Much of the U.S. hit by early winter weather, including record-breaking snowstorms.
And America's veterans were honored yesterday as thousands marched in a New York City parade dedicated to their service.
This is NTD Good Morning, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here are Stephanie Cox and Carrie Dunst.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Today is Wednesday, November 12th. You're watching NTD Good Morning. In today's top news, House lawmakers are back in Washington nearly 2 months after everything closed down. The chamber will vote on a measure to reopen the government after an overnight hearing. NTD's Melina Weiskup joins us live now. Melina, good to see you this morning. Should we expect this final vote to pass?
Yes, Steph. This is essentially the same bill that the House sent over to the Senate back in September 2 months ago with regards to the spending levels that's in this bill. There's just a new date for how long this continuing resolution, the short-term government funding, will last. It'll last through the end of January. It also moves the ball on the regular funding process, which the House Speaker says he's in favor of. Listen to Mike Johnson.
It really was a shutdown about nothing. I mean, what we're voting on is effectively exactly what we offered them several weeks back. We've added some appropriations bills now, which we're in favor of because it's getting us back to the regular order.
Now, Steph, a vote is expected in the House late this afternoon, but that could stretch into the evening. Those who are far away could see flight delays. One congressman from Wisconsin says he's dodging the airport altogether. Watch this selfie video that the congressman took ahead of a 16-hour motorcycle ride to D.C.
Now we got to get back to Washington, D.C. and vote on the bill. But because they shut down the government, the Democrats, the flights are too unreliable. So I'm going to ride on a motorcycle. It's going to take about 16 hours or so. It's going to be a little chilly. But I will do my duty. I'm getting back to D.C. We're going to get this country back on track.
Now, House Speaker Mike Johnson does need every single Republican vote because Democrats are expected to once again not vote for it, so they need a simple majority to get it through the House. But we could see at least 1 or 2 Democrats at most in the House joining on this GOP effort.
Now the discussion is revolving around health care, being that's been Democrats' big demand all along was to extend Obamacare subsidies. Have any proposals come out?
Right. This is a key issue right now. Because Obamacare subsidies do expire at the beginning of January, Democrats have proposed a 3-year extension of Obamacare, but that's not going to get any Republican support, if we're being frank here. If that wasn't already clear, a vote last night in a House committee made it so. Listen to the House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries with his proposal last night.
And now, what we've seen over the last several weeks is the Republican refusal to even extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits for working class Americans for a year. So that's why we're in the situation that we're in.
So like you just heard, he was commenting on the fact that Republicans won't even agree to a 1-year extension of Obamacare, let alone his proposal to extend the program for 3 years. So the committee, after he introduced the amendment last night, shot it down along party lines, just squashing any future debate about just a clean extension of Obamacare in general. Now, Republicans want to implement a totally new solution to skyrocketing premiums. Many have actually blamed Obamacare for the issue. One senator, John Kennedy, has equated that to just adding fresh paint to rotten wood, he says, if they were to extend Obamacare as is. So Republicans could either try to strip out and reform all of the pieces that they see are not great in Obamacare, or they could propose a totally new health policy agenda, which looks more likely at this point. But if Republicans choose to do that, it might lead to another showdown around health care specifically. So that's what we're going to be looking at for the next couple of weeks, Steph.
Well, many folks out there looking forward to seeing how their premiums shape up in the coming months. We'll be watching this closely. Thank you so much, Melina Weisskopf. Good to speak with you.
And I'm thinking that representative, I believe it's Derek Von Orden of Wisconsin, he just wanted an excuse to ride his Harley 1,000 miles.
Potentially
Maybe
so.
not, he made his point though.
All right, the Supreme Court has granted the Trump administration an extension on food stamp payments.
That's right. The nation's highest court has extended a temporary pause on a judge's order that would have forced the administration to fully fund the food aid during the government shutdown.
The decision keeps about $4 billion from reaching the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, for now. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson dissented, voting in favor of resuming payments.
The pause is now set to expire tomorrow night as Congress moves closer to ending the longest shutdown in U.S. history.
The administration argued that the courts can't legally reallocate federal funds and that only Congress can resolve the crisis by reopening the government.
SNAP benefits have already lapsed for millions, forcing families to rely on food pantries as lawmakers work to end this shutdown.
And Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy is warning of travel chaos if Congress fails to end the government shutdown by this weekend.
He says more than 10% of U.S. flights could be delayed, and some airlines might even stop flying altogether. NTD's Daniel Monahan brings us more. Plus, we hear from passengers who were caught in the travel breakdown.
The warning comes after one of the worst travel weekends since the shutdown began over 40 days ago, with more than 4,500 flights canceled. Thousands of air traffic controllers have been calling in sick, having gone weeks without pay, forcing airports to slow operations to maintain safety. Transport Secretary Sean Duffy says 6% of recent cancellations came from the FAA, speaking on Fox News.
And that's because the number one job is to keep the airspace safe.
Duffy says if air traffic controllers get paid, the country will be well on the way to recovery.
But if they don't get paid, I made this point today, you're going to see airlines seriously consider grounding their aircraft. They're not going to fly if we get to Friday and the government's not open.
Airlines canceled 1,200 flights yesterday as air traffic control staffing improved significantly ahead of an expected end to a record-setting government shutdown as soon as today. On Monday, President Trump threatened to dock the pay of any controller who didn't return to work. The shutdown has forced 13,000 air traffic controllers and 50,000 TSA agents to work without pay. Martin Nguyen was traveling to Colorado Springs to visit the Garden of the Gods to get in touch with nature.
So while we were there, we received a text message telling us that our original flight returning back home was going to be postponed for a day after the original date.
Martin says it was a good thing he was staying with family, so he had a place to stay.
But yeah, definitely was not prepared for that. So we had to contact our work and everything to make sure that we were able to get that taken care of.
Traveler Mike Ricks says reopening the government is the right decision.
We have so many people that are dependent on government subsidies, other government programs.
Ricks says he's worried about returning home Friday evening.
And so we're keeping close tabs on our flight and making sure that's still on track. But yes, definitely worried about getting back home.
Over 5 million passengers have been affected by staffing-related delays or cancellations since the shutdown began on October 1st. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And staying with the effect of the government shutdown and taking a look at how the Senate broke its impasse, we're joined by Aaron Dusso. He's an associate professor of political science at Indiana University, Indianapolis. Thank you for joining us this morning, Aaron. It seems like a bit of a twist because the Democrats swept the elections, but 7 Democratic senators and an independent who caucuses with the Democrats actually broke ranks to join the Republicans when it seemed like they had their leverage. They got the 60 votes out of the Senate. So what broke their gridlock that, really was the source of the shutdown?
Right. I think you're exactly right. You go from 1 week where you're winning elections across the country and almost a complete sweep to a situation where you seemingly are doing well in this shutdown when it comes to public opinion. Public opinion seemed to be weighing more on Republicans than it had been on Democrats. But then to suddenly change course and say that we're going to go ahead and, 8 of the members of the caucus decide to go along with Republicans and reopen the government. It's pretty surprising. And what precipitates that has to be a belief among those 8 individuals that things were going to start to turn against them in the future. And perhaps the air traffic controlling problems and air traffic problems that will happen over the Thanksgiving holiday was something that really loomed large for them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more that Thanksgiving, typically the busiest travel weekend of the year, and such a central part of the American culture, potentially that is what spooked those that broke away from, the unity of the Democratic Party. But I wonder specifically, when you have a coalition, each person is working for the team, but also working in their own interests. Are they potentially of purple states? Are they up for re-election? What was it that you think made Fetterman was clear the whole way, but what made this group join the Republicans when seemingly, as you referenced, they seem to have their moment of leverage and had maybe the Republicans on their heels?
Right. I mean, that's what's interesting is the 8 individuals, none of them are actually coming up for election next year. And actually, some of them are retiring, like Senator Durbin from Illinois. So it appears that they feel that they were trying to save the party from doing something that they thought was going to end up in a disaster, which at least hope that rather than some type of personal gain.
Yeah, very interesting to then understand what is happening with the Democrat Party, because as we just spoke about, they did have a good showing in these recent elections. Of course, they were in blue states. Publicly, Ro Khanna is calling for Minority Leader Schumer to be replaced. Jeffries is defending Schumer, saying that his fight was valiant in attempting, to preserve these COVID-era Obamacare subsidies. Schumer's certainly in a difficult position, but where are the Democrats as a party presently in the Congress?
I think the Democratic caucus within, the Senate and, members of the House are going to start calling even more for Senator Schumer to step aside. I mean, he's been a valiant warrior for the Democrats for many, many decades. And at this point, it seems like a lot of the politics may be passing him by because, this compromise right now seems like a compromise that you might have made in the 1990s rather than right now. And so politics have changed substantially where Republicans are going to push and push and push. And so if Democrats don't stand against that, they're going to lose substantially.
What other option might you think he could have taken, and what might the results of that option had been? How long would the shutdown have lasted in that scenario?
I mean, what they really needed to get was a firm commitment at a minimum that the Senate would pass, not just have a vote, but pass the potential ACA extension on the subsidies. And at minimum, that is what they really needed. Right now, all they got was the promise of a vote, and that vote is likely not to succeed, let alone trying to get some commitment from the House and the president to sign something. So those are things that were well beyond this agreement right now. But at a minimum, you could have talked to the senators across the aisle and got a commitment to essentially pass this and leave it up to the House to figure out what they want to do.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. Certainly, Mike Johnson was saying, this is what we offered, at the very beginning, 2 months ago. It seems like nothing was gained by the Democrats, but at the same time, it didn't seem like the Republicans had any intention of caving on that particular issue. It seems central to their platform. Either way, how do you think this plays into the midterms then?
I think the midterms are still quite a ways away, and what research suggests is that people don't tend to hold on to stuff that happened a year prior to the midterms. And so my guess is there are going to be a lot of new things for us to cover over this next year that people will largely forget about this, when it comes to voting next November.
And speaking of the progressive flank of the Democratic Party, Ro Khanna wanting, it appears, Schumer to be replaced by someone more in line with those sentiments. Those things tend to work well in blue states, but then when you get into more national politics, like statewide Senate races, does the progressive approach potentially hurt the Democratic chances in the midterms?
I mean, there's a lot of claims that that's the case, but I don't know that it's necessarily true because I'm not sure that it's actually been tried in a lot of these red states. So I'm in Indiana, which is a nice, solid red state. And every time the Democratic Party tries to run someone statewide, they run basically a Republican, oftentimes a former Republican, who espouses many of the same things that Republicans believe in and talks about how conservative they are. And then they lose substantially. So it's not like you're going to win in Indiana by essentially trying to espouse conservative views.
Well, there's a lot to look out for, and as you say, there is a lot more time, and I'm sure a lot more juicy news cycles that will come into play. Certainly, we're looking at how the Democratic Party will emerge, will new leaders emerge. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights this morning. Aaron Dusso, good to talk to you.
Thank you.
Next, let's take a look at the weather. The first taste of winter is here.
That's right. A powerful blast of Arctic air plunged much of the country into a deep freeze this week. Here's a closer look at some early winter weather.
From Alabama to Florida and Georgia, nearly 18 million people spent the first half of the week under a freeze warning, a shock to many after temperatures just days ago were in the 70s and 80s. In Jacksonville, Florida, a low of 28 degrees broke the city's previous daily record for November 11th, set back in 1977. The cold was so extreme that Florida even issued what's jokingly called a falling iguana advisory. The forecaster with the National Weather Service explained that when temperatures dip below 40, iguanas begin to fall from trees. Posts of stunned reptiles appeared across social media as Floridians bundled up in coats, a rare sight even for November. Meanwhile, across the Great Lakes and Northeast, heavy lake-effect snow brought hazardous driving and whiteout conditions. Some towns in Michigan and New York were buried under nearly half a foot of snow earlier this week, with wind chills well below freezing. Communities like Buffalo, Syracuse, and Niagara Falls woke up Tuesday under winter weather advisories, with forecasters predicting up to 6 inches of accumulation. In the Midwest, Indiana recorded its first measurable snowfall this season on Monday, causing more than 100 accidents in just one day. And in California, forecasters are tracking an atmospheric river expected to bring heavy rain and mountain snow later this week. The long plume of tropical moisture that formed over the Pacific Ocean will begin drenching the San Francisco Bay Area starting today, before quickly moving south. And in parts of the south, the frigid air created something beautiful, so-called frost flowers. Thin layers of ice emerged from stems of local plants in Kentucky and Arkansas. The current cold snap won't last too long. Forecasters say much of the U.S. will warm up by the second half of the week. Moving up north to Quebec, hundreds of thousands were without power yesterday after the province's first major snowstorm of the season over the weekend. Montreal's weather agency recorded nearly 8 inches of snow.
And while the Midwest was treated to some early snow, depending on your perspective, if it's a treat or it's, a trick, also the northern lights lit up the sky in the Midwest. Brilliant hues of green and pink were seen last night.
That's right. Stargazers captured time-lapse video last night of the colorful display over parts of the state. The northern lights were visible far south of their usual range, painting the sky above farms and small towns in shades of green and pink.
Oh, amazing, beautiful. The lights are caused by plasma, which is ejected from the sun during a solar storm, and that interacts with the Earth's geomagnetic field. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration forecast a powerful geomagnetic storm over northern states between November 11th and all the way to November 13th. So if you're there, you're going to definitely want to stay up late and have a look.
Yeah, what a sight that will be. Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. President Trump on social media says crime in Chicago has dropped due to federal presence.
Yeah, Trump says shootings are down 35%, robberies 40%, and carjackings 50%. He added, quote, "As we ramp up more assets, these numbers will continue to drop."
Assistant Homeland Security Secretary Tricia McLaughlin says immigration enforcement efforts are not stopping in Chicago.
Her comment comes in response to reports that the operations commander for the operation known as Midway Blitz will be leaving the area. NTD correspondent Jason Blair brings us more.
Assistant Homeland Security Secretary Tricia McLaughlin assures that the department is not stopping operations in Chicago. This is in response to reports that Border Patrol Commander Greg Bovino will be exiting the Chicago area. Bovino has been one of the main names and faces at the head of immigration efforts in Illinois. McLaughlin writes, "We aren't leaving Chicago. Since the start of Operation Midway Blitz, homicides are down 16%, shootings 35%, robberies 41%, and carjackings 48%. Multiple outlets have reported that Bovino and his team are set to leave the Chicago area as soon as this week, citing unnamed sources. However, the DHS has not officially confirmed this yet. Bovino has been the target of an alleged gang member in Illinois who was charged with putting a bounty on Bovino. Bovino is also facing lawsuits claiming he used aggressive tactics during immigration enforcement efforts in the state. NTD has reached out to the DHS for comment. And Customs and Border Patrol announces that retired agents and officers are welcome to rejoin their ranks. The department is offering double pay for eligible personnel, the CBP says in a statement. Through a dual compensation waiver, eligible retirees can receive their full annuity plus full salary, no reductions, no offsets. It's not just about filling positions, it's about bringing back experience, leadership, and legacy. The positions are full-time term appointments. Most will last from 1 to 4 years with possible extensions, according to the statement. CBP says interested applicants need to have been retired for at least 1 year. Jason Blair, NTD News.
Thank you, Jason. And the Department of Justice announced yesterday that it will investigate local security at the UC Berkeley campus after clashes broke out at a Turning Point USA event on Monday.
An assistant attorney general is questioning Antifa's role in the incident. NTD's Arlene Richards brings us more.
The Department of Justice on Tuesday announced it will begin an investigation into local security at UC Berkeley. This comes after a Frontlines TPUSA video posted on X showed violent protests at a Turning Point USA event on Monday. Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon responded to the post of Nick Sorter, an independent reporter who said, quote, Antifa has turned Turning Point's event at UC Berkeley in California into an absolute war zone. The event was Turning Point USA's first event in California since Charlie Kirk, the group's founder, was shot and killed in September. It was also the group's final stop on its American comeback tour. Sorter said in his post, quote, munitions are being lit on fire by Antifa while attendees are rushed into the venue. Dillon said in her own post that her department, Civil Rights, will investigate what happened here, and I see several issues of serious concern regarding campus and local security and Antifa's ability to operate with impunity in California. A large group of protesters appeared Monday afternoon outside the conservative group's event chanting, hey ho, Turning Point has to go. Organizers said Antifa thugs stormed the sold-out event. Protesters wearing Middle Eastern-style turbans and scarves clashed with police and attendees, leaving some covered in blood. Mikey McCoy, TPUSA Chief of Staff, said in an X post on Monday as the clash unfolded, quote, Antifa is breaking through police barricades and threatening our event attendees. Attorney General Pam Bondi said in an X post that Antifa is an existential threat. She said, quote, the violent riots at UC Berkeley last night are under full investigation by the FBI-led Joint Terrorism Task Force. We will continue to spare no expense unmasking all who commit and orchestrate acts of political violence. Antifa, which is short for anti-fascist, is characterized as a movement by some, but President Trump signed an order in September declaring them a terrorist group. The name Antifa is applied to factions of black-clad leftists or anarchists who show up at protests opposing the police or the government. Despite the chaotic scenes outside, organizers said the hours-long event was not disturbed inside. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
And Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon sent a letter to UC Berkeley police about the investigation and has asked them to preserve their records regarding the incident. Next, there could soon be another Kennedy in Washington, D.C. Jack Schlossberg has announced he's running for Congress. He's the grandson of former President John F. Kennedy. Schlossberg is running to replace the retiring Congressman Jerry Nadler, who represents New York's 12th congressional district. In a video announcing his campaign, the Democrat focused on affordability while criticizing President Trump. He could be facing a rather crowded field of challengers, though, including former Congresswoman Caroline Maloney and Cameron Kasky, who's a survivor of the Parkland High School shooting. Secretary of State, meanwhile, Marco Rubio is in Ontario as top diplomats from the Group of 7 industrialized democracies meet in Canada to discuss trade and defense spending. Rubio and diplomats from Britain, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, and Japan met yesterday and will meet again today. Foreign ministers from other countries, including Australia, Saudi Arabia, South Korea, and Ukraine, have also been invited. The G7 meeting is expected to place Ukraine and the Middle East high on the agenda. There have been disagreements among members over the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza. Britain, Canada, and France announced they would recognize a Palestinian state even without a resolution to end the conflict. The gathering comes after the U.S. ended trade talks with Canada when the Ontario government ran an anti-tariff advertisement. And tensions continue to rise between the U.S. and Venezuela. An American aircraft carrier strike group arrived in the Latin American region yesterday.
At the same time, Venezuela is carrying out its own military drills. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has the latest on the Venezuela situation.
A U.S. aircraft carrier strike group arrived in Latin America on Tuesday. Washington sent the USS Gerald R. Ford, which is the world's largest aircraft carrier. According to the Pentagon, its presence will bolster U.S. capacity to detect, monitor, and disrupt illicit actors and activities that compromise the safety and prosperity of the United States homeland and our security in the Western Hemisphere. As tensions keep rising, Venezuela is carrying out new military exercises. The country's government released this footage showing the troops preparing for conflict. Venezuela's government says the drill aims to boost the nation's independence. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
And Turkey says 20 of its soldiers were killed when a military transport plane crashed in Georgia yesterday. The aircraft had taken off from Azerbaijan and was returning to Turkey when it went down near the Georgian border yesterday. Turkish private broadcaster NTV reported wreckage from the plane scattered across farmland and hillsides. Turkey's state-run news agency says the aircraft lost contact shortly after entering Georgian airspace and did not issue a distress signal. Ankara has not provided a reason for the crash, but said Turkish and Georgian authorities have started inspections at the site. The crash was Turkey's deadliest military incident since 2020, when Russian-backed Syrian forces killed 33 Turkish troops in northwest Syria.
And a new bridge in southwestern China's Sichuan province has collapsed just months after it had opened. Authorities say no casualties, fortunately, were reported after a part of the 2,500-foot-long Hongqi Bridge gave way yesterday. Officials closed the bridge a day earlier after cracks appeared on nearby slopes and roads, warning of potential landslides. Officials confirmed yesterday the mountainside gave way, triggering landslides that caused the bridge and its approach road to collapse. Dramatic video on Chinese social media showed the bridge buckling before falling into the river below. The bridge was built earlier this year as part of a national highway to Tibet and is now the subject of an official investigation.
Now over to France, where a court has opened a criminal probe into TikTok after allegations that its algorithm pushed minors towards suicide.
The case follows multiple family lawsuits and a damning parliamentary report calling the app, quote, a dangerous algorithmic trap. NTD's international correspondent David Vives reports from Paris.
France's justice system has opened a preliminary investigation into social media giant TikTok, following concerns that its algorithm could push minors towards suicide. This follows recent cases of teenagers who committed suicide across the country, and a lawsuit filed by 7 families accusing TikTok of exposing their children to content that encouraged self-harm. The Commission heard from over 170 experts and received 30,000 testimonies from the public. One teenager testified before lawmakers. At first, I saw videos about art and music, but soon everything turned darker. I fell into a harmful loop. Investigators are now examining several potential offenses, including the promotion of methods for taking one's own life. A TikTok spokesperson told Reuters that the Chinese company categorically rejects what it calls the Commission's misleading presentation. French lawmakers have been scrutinizing TikTok for years. In 2023, former Senator André Gattolin contributed to a report on the platform. He says there are signs that the Chinese Communist Party may use TikTok as a tool in its warfare operations.
Generally speaking, social networks like Facebook and others become profitable fairly quickly, turning a profit after 4, 5, or 6 years. TikTok, through Binance, has been around for many years, and they have more expenses than they have resources. They don't sell personal data, and for good reason. They don't market it because the destination is the Chinese regime regime, the Chinese Communist Party, which means filing as many people as possible. So the driving idea behind TikTok is not that TikTok should become a leader in its sector according to the accepted rules of international trade or capitalism, so to speak. The idea is to introduce a quasi-military offensive dimension, which could be described as hybrid warfare, in order to truly undermine the integrity and unity of a nation.
In July, TikTok was fined $615 million by an EU agency after an Irish court found that users' data was accessible from China and insufficiently protected. Gatolin says this mass data collection effectively weaponizes TikTok against its users.
We know there's a massive collection of data. It's a way of gaining control over the future of our societies, and that's extremely serious. TikTok said that there is no data transfer, but we have seen in investigations that there were Chinese computer scientists from ByteDance who broke into the app and then transferred data and stole it. You know, all these systems are called backdoors, and so if you leave the door open, you can't say that this is a robbery, I guess.
A parliamentary report published in September 2025 recommended the ban of TikTok for teenagers younger than 15 years old. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
Great report, David. And a TikTok spokesperson told Reuters the company invests heavily in age-appropriate experiences for teens.
The company has said it has over 50 preset features to support teen well-being and removes 9 out of 10 videos that violate its rules before anyone even sees them. And America's veterans were honored yesterday as thousands marched in a New York City parade dedicated to their service. Stay with us. We'll be right back with that story and more. And President Trump now awaits a response from the BBC to his $1 billion lawsuit threat amid a controversy that has led to the resignation of 2 senior executives at the BBC and has led to the public broadcaster's chairman apologizing. The controversy is over intentionally edited as well as omitted language from Trump's January 6, 2021 speech on the day of the Capitol breach. The omission intentionally removes the keywords, quote, "to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard," and it splices together 2 sound bites that appeared almost 1 hour apart as if they were continuous language in Trump's speech. The result? The altered language, taken out of context, gives the viewer the impression that Trump intentionally incited violence on that day. Joining us now for analysis from London is Lee Hall. He's the host of NTD's British Thought Leaders. Lee, thank you so much for joining us this morning or your afternoon. What were your initial thoughts to this story?
Great to be back, Carrie. I wasn't surprised by this. I think something like this had to happen, and I think more will happen. In Britain's mainstream media, in my humble opinion, has been biased against Donald Trump for over 10 years. Now he's the most powerful man in the world, and they're in a bit of a pickle. Let me give your viewers some background. At the time of my parents, or even when I was younger, there wasn't this choice of TV and radio. There was BBC. You watched it as a child, as a senior, whether you like sports, finance, cooking, whatever your taste. The BBC would cater for you. So we grew up trusting and loving the BBC as Britain's finest export, respected worldwide for being unbiased and fair. So, I mean, something like this is just a bombshell, really, to a British person. If you can't trust the BBC, then who can you trust?
Yeah, it is quite surprising that the intentionality in trying to change the meaning of what were direct quotes in a speech. But the thing that I don't understand is, why is this surfacing now?
Okay, so in June, Michael Prescott, who's a former standards advisor to the BBC, he sent this 19-page memo to the BBC board and he stepped down. He criticized the BBC's editing President Trump's January the 6th speech, said it's completely misleading. And he wrote of his despair in action by the BBC executive over widespread evidence of bias. So he talked about transgender issues, he talked about Israel. So Britain's Telegraph newspaper, they got hold of this memo and they've recently broke the story. It's been enormous. And we've seen the fallout already. The Director General has gone, the news CEO has resigned. So they've fallen on their swords, but they still deny there's any institutional bias. I think it's also worth reflecting on the financial side of this. In Britain, you have to pay the BBC license fee. If I buy a TV and just to watch you guys on NTD and don't watch BBC, I'll still have to pay this $230 a year license fee. People are a bit fed up. They see it as an unfair tax. And the BBC has seen the income from the license fee down 30% over the last 15 years. So they turned to America as a way to solve this cash flow problem, rolled out a subscription service in June in the US. Now the White House is talking about banning BBC reporters, and this is a serious problem for them.
Yeah, such an interesting turn of events. Yesterday, we played a reaction from Nigel Farage. He's the leader of the Reform UK party. He said the timing of this documentary, with the misleading editing, it amounts to election interference. What was Farage referring to?
Well, this documentary with the edited January the 6th clip was released in October 2024. So that's just before the US election. And this was released by Panorama, which is BBC's flagship documentary maker, most trusted program, really. And it gave the impression that Donald Trump's directly inciting violence ahead of what happened at the Capitol on January the 6th. But he wasn't. And the BBC is this powerful international organization. Releasing something like this ahead of an election could have a serious impact. So, as you mentioned, the chair apologized, called it an error of judgment that misled the viewers. I think if President Trump had lost that election, this would have just got lost in the kind of annals of history, but he didn't, and things went a different way. And now the BBC has made its bed, and it is kind of lying in it.
Yeah, it's so interesting. As you mentioned, it seems like they're coming to the U.S. not only for offering a subscription service to help with their own cash flows, but we see an unusual courting of President Trump by the royal family. There's been a lot of pomp and circumstance for him to come and visit. I presume in an effort to keep relations strong. And Trump has said himself that we have no greater partner than Britain for the United States. So how does this then play into that, being, as you mentioned, that the BBC is really not separate of the British government?
Yeah, and that's kind of the main issue here. The BBC is not some kind of private organization doing what it wants to do. It's funded by money collected from the taxpayers, and it has a constitution that's overseen by the government, etc. So it's really important what the BBC says and does. If you've got part of Britain, such as our Prime Minister or our royal family, trying to improve connections with the US administration and with President Trump particularly, and at the same time you've got the BBC doing things that are seen as a bit kind of unethical, to say the least, then that's quite a serious problem to deal with, really, two kind of opposing factions almost.
Yeah, Lee, and then another incident that came up was when a bombing at a Gaza hospital happened. The BBC was quick to report that Israel carried out the attack, but it turned out it was friendly fire, and it was actually Hamas terrorists who blew up their own hospital. The BBC leadership had said that this was a one-off incident with Trump, but here we see another incident. So is there a systemic problem within the BBC? And if so, how does it get addressed?
Yeah, I would completely agree with you. There's a systemic problem, and addressing it will be very difficult. In the editing of the president's speech is kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. I mean, it's a big straw, the poor camel. This is a $1 billion lawsuit, but there's loads of other issues before this. I mean, you mentioned Israel and Gaza. There's ongoing accusations of biased BBC reporting there. There was a documentary, BBC documentary on Gaza, breached the Ofcom broadcasting rules and was removed. It was narrated by the son of a Hamas minister, and the BBC didn't disclose that. Hamas is banned in the UK by the government as terrorists. BBC refuses to call them terrorists. Dame Priti Patel, who is a Member of Parliament, former government minister, she is demanding the government review funding of BBC's Arabic service. She says it's so biased, it risks becoming the Hamas broadcasting service instead of the British broadcasting service. And then there's all the gender issue stuff. So we've got gender critical campaigners sending a letter to the BBC board saying the BBC's normalisation of transgender ideology has had real harmful consequences. There's lots of positive stories about drag queens. There's very little about what detransitioners have been through, for example. Going back to Mr. Prescott's memo that started this whole situation, he said that BBC's transgender coverage was subject to censorship by this specialist LGBT reporter team who just refused to cover gender-critical stories. So I think, as with many parts of our society, the BBC has been subject to this ideological shift in many areas. It's going to be really difficult for them to get out of this.
Well, these are very much surprising revelations. Appreciate your coverage and following this. Hope to keep up with it with you. Lee Hall, thank you for joining.
Thank you, Kerry.
Taiwan has evacuated more than 8,000 people as Tropical Storm Fung-Wong brings heavy rain and flooding to the island's east and south. The storm killed at least 27 people in the Philippines and has weakened from a typhoon as it hits Taiwan. 51 people were reported injured today as floodwaters inundated homes and villages. Television footage showed waist-deep waters and cars swept away by surging floods. Schools and offices are closed across southern and central Taiwan. Forecasters said Fung-Wong would graze Taiwan's southern tip before moving back out to sea later today.
Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Carrie Dunst. If you're just joining us now, here are some of today's top headlines. House lawmakers are back in Washington today after nearly 2 months. They'll vote on a measure to reopen the government, which is expected to pass before it heads to the president's desk for signature. The bill will contain the same spending levels as the one that was sent to the Senate months ago, and it will fund the government until the end of January at least. The Supreme Court is allowing the Trump administration to keep food stamp payments on hold. It's extending a pause on a judge's order to restore funding during the shutdown. The administration argued that the courts can't legally reallocate federal funds and that only Congress can resolve the crisis by actually reopening the government. However, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson dissented, voting to resume the payments. The pause expires tomorrow night as Congress moves closer to ending the nation's longest ever shutdown. And Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy is warning of a travel collapse if Congress doesn't end the government shutdown by this weekend. He says more than 10% of flights could be delayed and some airlines might even ground all their planes. The warning follows one of the worst weekends for travelers since the shutdown began. Thousands of flights were canceled as unpaid air traffic controllers called in sick. And much of the country got its first taste of winter with a wave of Arctic air sending temperatures plunging. Nearly 18 million people in the Southeast were under freeze warnings this week, and the extreme cold in Florida prompted a, quote, falling iguana alert as stunned reptiles dropped from trees. Up north, heavy snow buried parts of Michigan and New York, while out west, California braces for heavy rain later this week. Those are this morning's top headlines. With that, Steph, over to you.
Thanks, Carrie. President Trump laid a wreath in Arlington National Cemetery yesterday to commemorate the sacrifices of American veterans, and the president proclaiming Veterans Day as Victory Day for World War I. NTD's Washington correspondent Mariotu has the details.
President Trump was in Virginia participating in a ceremony and where he paid tribute to American veterans throughout history, from the Civil War to World War II and the Vietnam War. President Trump also touted the recent rebrand of the Department of Defense to the Department of War, while vowing to restore what he calls the winning spirit of the U.S. military. The president also touts his administration's recent initiatives to combat veteran homelessness. He highlights particularly an executive order that he signed over the summer, which directs the creation of a facility that will house 6,000 homeless veterans by 2028.
Generation after generation, America's warriors have left behind the comforts of home and family to face violence, evil, and death so that our families could know joy, goodness, and peace. To every veteran, we love our veterans. Thank you for your service. Thank you very much.
President Trump laying a wreath on the tomb of the unknown soldier at Arlington National Cemetery and thanking American veterans.
We honor those who have worn the uniform, who have borne the battle that has defended our freedom for 250 years.
And Vice President J.D. Vance, himself a former Marine, says America's most important natural resource is its young service people.
That is a resource we must protect. Our sacred responsibility to our veterans is to make sure that the American military is the bravest and best fighting force anywhere in the world.
This, while President Trump declares,
but it's my proclamation that we are now going to be saying and calling Victory Day for World War I.
Touting his administration for bringing back what the Department of War Secretary Pete Hegseth has called the warrior ethos.
So we're not going to be politically correct anymore. From now on, when we fight a war, we only fight for one reason: to win. We fight to win.
Meanwhile, President Trump congratulates House Speaker Mike Johnson on the Senate's passage of a short-term spending bill to reopen the government.
Congratulations to you and to John and to everybody on a very big victory. We're opening up our country. Should have never been closed. Should have never been closed.
And expresses confidence in the bill's final passage in a surprise appearance on ESPN.
So the House is going to vote, and I think they're going to vote positively. I think most people want to see it open. Only people that hate our country want to see it not open.
The majority of the ESPN interview, though, was about the role of sports in President Trump's political life. And indeed, President Trump doubles down on his heavy criticism of the NFL's new kickoff format, which was adopted just last season in an effort to reduce player injuries. President Trump calls the kickoff both unromantic and demeaning.
Thank you, Mari Otsu, for that report. President Trump is expected to host a private dinner tonight with several top business leaders.
An administration official told Reuters they could include the chief executives of the NASDAQ and JP Morgan Chase, though their representatives did not immediately respond to requests for comment. JP Morgan has announced a decade-long investment program worth more than $1 trillion. It's aimed at industries central to national security, supply chain manufacturing, as well as energy independence. And in New York City yesterday, thousands of military veterans were celebrated as the nation marked the 250th anniversary of our armed forces. And NTD's David Martin was out there and has the report.
I'm here at the 106th Annual Veterans Day Parade here in New York City, asking veterans what this day means to them.
Yeah, Veterans Day is a day for us veterans. We serve the country. That's what veterans do, serve our country, give up our lives, to sign a check on that dotted line, suffer up through our lives. That's what Veterans Day is for me.
All my friends that I've lost over the years, I served from 1970 to 1976 in the United States Army, and later on I rejoined the Army at the end of 1976, keep alive all those that did not make it, and that's why I continue to serve. I'm a member of the American Legion for 45 years.
Veterans Day has always been special to me. I'm the sixth New Yorker, native New Yorker, to actually wear a uniform in my family, and we all went to wars going back to World War I. So it's always been special, that family connection with me. And then again, we always say it's not just a parade, it is the largest veterans reunion in the country. And it's iconic to be here on Fifth Avenue every year, no matter what the weather is.
So on this day, New York City honors those veterans who've served their country and thanks them for all they've done. This is Dave Martin for NTD News.
And it was a cold Veterans Day here in New York City. It was in the 30s, but over in Los Angeles, hundreds of service members enjoyed warmer weather, and the veterans were honored there at Dodger Stadium for Veterans Day.
The Los Angeles Dodgers welcomed them and their families for a special celebration, and NTD's Christina Corona was there, and she tells us more from the very baseball field.
We're here at Dodger Stadium, where the World Series champion Dodgers are honoring those who served with a very special Veterans Day celebration.
Around 350 pre-selected active duty service members and veterans, along with their families, are getting the full Dodger experience, taking batting practice, playing catch right on the field, and touring the ballpark.
It's amazing. First time on the field, first time fielding a ball. Also, same thing. Yeah, first time hitting on the field. I mean, this is a dream come true.
Coming off the Dodgers World Series win, veterans even got to take a picture with the brand new trophy alongside former Dodgers pitcher Orel Hershiser.
Yeah, we took a picture with the trophy.
Yeah, we got a couple in there.
Couldn't touch it though.
Yeah.
Veterans can also visit a resource fair offering services and support for them and their families. Working Dogs for Warriors is a program that helps veterans and first responders cope with post-traumatic stress caused by difficult events or calls for service.
Working Dogs for Warriors is a program to help train us to train the service dogs to help with PTSD mainly, but other disabilities also that that first responders and veterans are afflicted with.
Jean McAllister has had her service dog, Bjorn, since he was just 8 weeks old. He's now 2 years old, and she shares how much he has helped her.
Working Dogs for Warriors has helped me and many of my friends and coworkers with the resources that they need. Service dogs are great resources for veterans. He's just the best companion for me.
And what Veterans Day means to them.
Just a day to recognize everyone who sacrificed and served, not necessarily the people who had died in service, which is typically Memorial Day, but veterans today, just to come together and celebrate the sacrifices we have already made. And I mean, a lot of camaraderie out here.
Organizers say it's just one small way the franchise is giving back to those who give so much. Reporting from third base at Dodger Stadium, Christina Corona, NTD News.
Thanks to Christina for that report. Now, November 11th is a day observed across North America. In Canada, it's known as Remembrance Day. It's, of course, a time to honor veterans and members of the armed forces who sacrificed for peace and freedom.
Across the country, people gathered for ceremonies marked by silence as well as solemn tribute, reflecting on courage, sacrifice, and the hope for lasting peace. Here's a closer look.
Across the country, civilians and service members gathered before memorials, bowing their heads in silent remembrance of those who gave their lives for the nation.
Without their sacrifice, we wouldn't have the freedom that we have, and that's the greatest honor that you could have, is to sacrifice your life for others. And here we are, 80-some years later, still remembering them, and I hope it continues.
It's service to Canada as a whole. The young, the old, those of us that came before, those of us that will come after. It is about making sure that we leave a peaceful and stable society for our children and for ourselves now.
Canada needs to stand on its own feet in the world, and this is one way that we can do it through military service. I hope the world moves into a more peaceful state.
Privileged to be able to follow in my father's footsteps as he followed in his father's.
As the ceremony went on, the atmosphere remained solemn. While honoring the fallen, many reflected on the meaning of peace, carrying both remembrance and hope for the years ahead.
With the history of war, nobody ever wins. It saddens me what's going on in the world right now with wars breaking out all over. It's very tragic still in our day and time when we've learnt and lived through so many wars and we've seen what it's accomplished. I only wish for world peace.
It is a time where we stand up and we protect those that can't and be the nation we should be.
Beyond the ceremonies, many see Remembrance Day as a chance to pass on gratitude and reflection to the next generation.
I've encouraged my children to observe it, and reading that to the service is a way of continuing the tradition and remembering.
I think it's important to remember what all brought us here so that we can do better for the future.
NTD News, Canada.
And up ahead, November is National Family Caregivers Month. It celebrates those who give their time and energy to care for friends or family in need. And we'll be getting advice from caregiving expert Zahar Paz on how to help those who help others. Right after this, stay tuned. Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. November is National Family Caregivers Month. It celebrates those who give their time and energy to support a family member or a friend in need.
But we sometimes forget that those caregivers need support themselves. So joining us today with some tips to support our caregivers is Zahar Paz. She's a survivor of breast cancer and a certified somatic practitioner. And thank you so much for joining us. It's such a relevant topic. Especially going into Thanksgiving, we forget about the people who care for the others. And with somatic practice, it's about this mind-body connection. And I just wanted to, get your tips on what can people do to feel calm in the moment when they're, in what would otherwise be, very stressful, busy time when you're running around caring for others and you don't really have that moment to really reset yourself.
Yeah, and that's usually the frame of thought. I need a big extended amount of time to take care of myself. But there's one thing that we have with us all the time, which is our breath. Our breath is the language of our body. And anytime you can extend your exhale, you're allowing your body to relax. You're cueing to your nervous system, it's time to calm down. So one of the best practices I like to do, and why I love it, is no one can really tell if you're doing it, is you inhale for a count of 4, you hold your breath for a count of 4, and then you exhale for a count of 6. So just extending that exhale cues to your body, rest, relax, and doing it 3 times is usually the magic trick.
Oh, we'll take note of that. Yes, certainly. It's the times when you need it most that you feel that you can't give yourself something like that. But as you mentioned, nobody can necessarily tell, and it doesn't take that much time. You've got to breathe anyway, right?
Yeah, I just did it right now.
Right. There you go. I
had no idea.
Yeah, very subtle. Now, another aspect is many people have tried affirmations, right? If they're trying to find a way to think more positively, but there can be some challenges there. It may not always feel that natural or feel like it fits for everyone. Do you have any advice on potentially how to use this tool?
Absolutely. So affirmations take a little bit of extra energy. I am safe, I am happy, I am calm. And usually there's a voice on the inside like, am I feeling it yet? And that takes a bit of an energy exchange. So what I invite people to do, especially in these busy times when you're caring for other people or getting ready for the holidays, is turn that into a question. How can I feel calm? What can I do for myself to feel calm? And usually thinking about your other senses, back to that breath we just covered, or maybe even something warm to drink, hot water or tea, and coming to the touch and the taste, that helps us feel calm. So instead of an affirmation, ask yourself a question. What do I need right now to feel calm, happy, relaxed, whatever it is that you're needing to feel?
And that sort of dovetails into this concept of self-care. It seems like nobody was talking about it a year or 2 ago, and now everywhere you turn, it's like, oh, self-care this, self-care that.
Yes.
But what you're suggesting is it's not just a phrase, but or a concept, but a system. Like you actually have to approach it with a bit more strategy to get any benefit. Can you explain?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we get in this frame of mind that self-care needs to be on Sundays or a big half day or going to the spa. But can it be a part of our lifestyle in these small moments, these micro rituals like the breath or turning into the question instead of an affirmation? Finding moments where, especially as a caregiver, if you're taking care of someone else, there's this thing called parallel care rituals. So the caregiver is taking water when the person is eating, or when they are napping, they're going outside and getting some fresh breath. So it's really about finding those small moments in the day where you could check in with yourself.
And caregiving itself can lend itself to being, you need to be switched on all of the time just in case, depending on the situation. Mm-hmm. But we each have our own unique way of kind of like responding to stress and being in that state of alert. If you could dig into what those different states are and potentially how to manage that if you know what your state is.
Yes, so a patient and caregivers are going to go through the 4 Fs, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. But rarely do they go through them at the same time. So that's important to remember. If you're in fight, you might be a little bit agitated or defensive. If you're in flight, you're doing a lot of research or filling your calendar with a bunch of things. Freeze may look like you're just kind of staring off into nothing or feeling really numb or kind of stuck in molasses. And fawn is saying yes to too many things, like people pleasing. So if you can recognize that, that helps you regulate it. And also it helps you choose a more positive response. What I like to remind people is maybe you said yes, maybe you did a lot of research, but you're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to close the laptop, put the phone away, or cancel that thing that you said yes to.
Now, New Yorkers and people everywhere are struggling with this particular concept, how to help caregivers. So we actually went out into the street and collected some questions. So the first one we're going to play is from Jorge, if you guys could play that.
A lot of us live in a big city, and obviously working Monday through Friday, it's a lot. So we find it hard to engage with one another, and we feel disconnected, isolated, lonely. So what would you recommend us to be able to practice since this has become very hard for all of us?
That loneliness or disconnectedness is really a lack of presence. So can you be more present when you go get your morning coffee? Eye contact and a smile can do a lot. Instead of a text, what about a voice memo? Or making time for that phone call is really important. And we have a bunch of things on our to-do list, right? So can we begin to include some of that community aspect, whether you're going to a lecture or some sort of a class, inviting somebody for a walk. So it's really inviting yourself to be present with other people, as well as yourself. If you like the one you're hanging out with, which is yourself, you tend to not feel lonely.
Love that. Okay, Christina wanted to know about tracking symptoms of burnout.
What are some ways to measure your burnout? So is it just tiredness, or are you, is it more serious, something more serious?
What do you think?
I love, love, love this question. So burnout tends to show up in the mind before it shows up in the body. Our body is a machine and it will keep going through the rituals. But if you are feeling that you wake up and your mind is a little bit cloudy, or you're feeling more irritable, or the things that used to give you fulfillment and purpose are really not bringing you that joy, these are cues. And burnout is not saying, hey, it's over, it's all done. It's an opportunity for a boundary and coming back to those micro rituals. Can I sit back in my chair and do some breathing? Can I make sure I'm setting a little buffer time before and between my meetings? So it's really just cueing yourself. Am I feeling different? Am I thinking different? Do I feel like I'm in a fog? And offering yourself more time off.
Let's go to our final question from Greg. Let's have a look.
What is the best way for to make sure a caregiver is okay while they're going through that process, and then after they've lost that person, to make sure they're okay going forward?
Very meaningful one. Your thoughts on that?
Yes, it's so meaningful. As a breast cancer survivor, I saw my caregivers going through it. And a lot of the times they said, oh, you're going through so much, what I'm going through doesn't matter. And I want to say it does matter. You're allowed to have those emotions, and naming those emotions is so important. Maybe you don't do it with the person that you're taking care of, but can you find that support system and name how you are feeling? Saying I'm tired, or I'm overwhelmed, or I'm angry. Just the initial way of saying it really, really helps. And if you're taking care of yourself while you're taking care of other people, when that person passes, then it doesn't feel like, oh, this relationship with myself is brand new. And that person that may have left your life really wanted you to take care of yourself. And what I know about the feeling of guilt is guilt makes you the only one responsible. And you're not the only one responsible. There's a lot of factors that come into play. And that person would have wanted you to take care of yourself. So make sure that you're pouring into your own cup as you're taking care of other people.
Well, as we go into the holidays, this is such helpful advice. I know it's meaningful to so many people. Sahar Paz, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And at this point, we do have to end our show, but if you have any feedback, please write us. We'd love to hear from you.
And for round-the-clock original news coverage, check us out at ntd.com/live. See you soon.